So I already did this once, but I thought why not make another update to the Infernity tier list. Things have changed, we got a new card, Infernity Cauldron. So figured might as well just make another video on Infernity. So today we're going to talk about which Infernity cards are good, and I'm going to place them in the ranking. So yeah, there's a new rank added, Sin. If you play this, stop playing Infernity. So let's make it clear, if you play any of these cards, please do whatever you can to stop playing Infernity, sell your deck, just stop playing Infernity in general, you don't know what you're doing. Anyways, we ranked them from S to F, and of course that's special rank for especially bad cards, and we will consider the age of the card. If a card is from 2011 or something like that, we will be less harsh to it since, you know, that's 10 years ago. The game has changed a lot, mostly in the power creep department, so that's something to keep in mind. Starting off, Archer, I think an E tier is fine. It's something like Dual Links, that's potential. Back then it was cool to copy it with 100 eyes, swing down for 3k. There are ways to get multiple into the grave, revive them, and then you just smack for a lot of damage directly. In times when Engage Rent is common. Not saying it's a valid strategy back then, but you know, it's better than some of the cards I'll be placing in F tier, so an E tier is justified. 30 Archfiend is a really good one-off, it's the face of the deck. Now if it ever goes to 2 or 3, you will still run one copy. It's a one-off, for a reason. But it's a really good one-off, it searches the entire deck, it special summons itself if you draw it. Infernity is honestly just Archfiend Turbo, so it needs to be an S tier. Now Avenger, still F tier. Now people will get upset about this, but it's just a terrible card. It's a level 1 tuner, so that's why we run it, but besides that, it's just a vanilla monster. And I don't think you get special credit for that kind of stuff. Some people might disagree with my reasoning here, but if we get any better level 1 tuner, we would cut Avenger without a doubt, so I mean, yeah. The effect just isn't good. Infernity Barrier, I'd say about A tier, it's really good. It's a Solemn Judgment that has somewhat specific conditions. Nowadays most Infernity Barrier-like cards are way easier to use. But hey, it's still an Omni-Negate, so, you know, it has its uses. Infernity Beast, yeah, I think this one actually deserves the F tier. It's a cute effect when it attacks, your opponent cannot activate spell traps. If it were to apply to the entire field like Dwarf, it would have been a bit better, but no, it's only itself, so F tier for sure. It's just not a good card. Infernity Beetle, yeah, I'd say actually about D tier. It's really bad nowadays, but back then it was okay. Just getting 2 tuners was really nice. 1200 beats was also somewhat relevant at times if you had like an Archfiend. You could just swing for game with those Beetles at times, or you know. It gives you access to certain things. Nowadays there's no excuse to run it. Infernity Sage exists. But you know, we do consider the age of the deck, and then it's an okay card. Infernity Break's gonna get a B tier. It does really have a cost besides just having an empty hand and needing to banish an Infernity card. You can just banish an Infernity spell trap, which you won't use anyway. And yeah, it just destroys a card. Nowadays that's not really relevant anymore, but especially back then, back in the day, it was nice. Infernity Conjurer, D tier. I used to be a big fan of this card, but the biggest issue is that it doesn't really have a way to summon itself onto the field or get itself into the graveyard, and there's many cards to run to the grave. There's just no real place for this card in current Infernity decks. Now, if Infernity gets the reinforcements of the army they deserve, then maybe this card will see play, just like some other cards, but besides that, eh. This requires you to discard like 3 cards, and then you can special summon Infernity monster from a graveyard. Now, this requires 3 other cards. So you must have 4 cards in your hand to resolve this. If you ever played Infernity, you know why this is impossible. It's not a card you can actually use in duels. It's made in 2020, it needed to be better, so if you play this, stop playing Infernity. Seriously, this card's terrible, beyond terrible, and yeah. Not much of an excuse to defend it with. Infernity Destroyer, deal like 600 burn damage if you destroy monster for battle, like, yes, burn damage, that's what we want. Even in 2010 it wasn't good, so F tier for sure. Doom Archfiend, also definitely a sin. This card's terrible, not only is level 6, really awkward to go into, since your tuner, the only tuner you run is a level 1, well, some builds you now run Wildcat, so that's a 3. But even then, how are you really going into it? It's hard, it's a hard level to go into, most builds don't run it. Well, Infernity Beetle, if you're running Infernity Beetle, you're a bad player nowadays, let's be honest. It's hard to make it, what does it do? Once per turn you can destroy a card face up on the field. That sounds really great until you realize it's not a quick effect. And if it's not a quick effect, then what are we doing with it? We're going first deck. Well, going second, you can break boards with it. Everred Bruineck, we don't play that card either. Yes, it makes a dark Infernity that goes into attack twice. Oh, sorry, a dark synchro, but we don't have issues OTKing. We get a Savage Dragon, an Archfiend, we get so many powerful monsters already, we don't need more power. Attack power, that is. This card does nothing. It's level 6 vanilla, basically. It doesn't do anything, and that's printed in 2020. That's awful. That's dreadful. If any card deserves a bottom tier, it's this card. It's terrible. Doom Dragon, I'd say it's about a C tier. Around release, its effect was nice. There's Infernity in the name, you can just easily revive it. But its age definitely matters. Plus it's level 8. Level 8 is actually easy to make, so, you know, that also gives it special points. If this came out today, I would probably give it like an E tier, but hey, its ability to destroy cards, even if they're face down, is pretty okay. At least it's reliable destruction, even on face downs. That a certain card printed in 2020 doesn't even do. And yeah, it does skip your it can't attack if you use the effect, but you know, it's still some burn damage, easy to revive, 3k attack. It's one way to get your barriers live. If they don't have Kaijus, they're not gonna get over this anyway. 30 Dwarf, E tier. Now, piercing damage never was great, not even in 2010, but at least it gives all of your monsters piercing damage, and that could be relevant against certain strategies if you're making 100 Ice Turbo deck. Which sounds very specific, but hey, I've done it in the past, so I know there's some use for it. 30 Force, this was like, if one of your 30 monsters control is attacked while you have no cards in your hand, destroy that monster, then special summon one of 30 monsters from your graveyard, something like that. Single target destruction, it's not great. It's too slow, it's unreliable, it relies on your opponent doing something. That's usually a bad sign for a trap card, so E tier, it's too specific. There are better traps out there. Even back then you could just run Deep Prison or something like that. Infernity General, perfect C tier. Well actually, B tier, it's just hard to run. Reviving 2 level 3 or lower monsters is just insane, even Infernity. That's just a free Leviair with the right setup, and Leviair is another Mirage. This is just like 100, it's basically a Infernity launcher in that case. Otherwise you could also make it with Necromancer and, you could also use it with Necromancer Avenger to go into a free Arclight, which is another Omni Negate. Yeah, it's a good card. We don't have space for it, but it's definitely good. If Dark Greffer ever goes to 3 again, we might run it. Or, you know, if you get a Rota we deserve, that we don't have, maybe. 30 Guardian, probably about a D tier. It's not really useful in modern builds or hell back then, but it's definitely obnoxious and it might make some decks outright lose. The only way to get rid of this is by removing it from the field without destruction, as it's immune to battle and card effect destruction when you have no cards in your hand, so yeah, good luck getting rid of this. Nowadays it's very easy, back then you had to put in some effort to get rid of it sometimes, so you know, I think it's cool. 100 Eyes, probably B tier, just copying the effect of Mirage is very good. We run 2 copies of it in the modern build still, and it's a really old card, so that should say enough about the card. It still doesn't have Infernity in the name, so B tier is justified. But yeah, it's a very good synchro. Infernity Inferno, C tier. Nowadays it's terrible, it's way too slow, but back then it gave you setup, it's the closest to a search card Infernity ever had. You can discard 1 or 2 cards, set the same amount of Infernity cards from your deck to the grave. Nowadays that's way too slow, back then you could just set up your Launcher, your Mirage, your Necromancer that way, and you know, after 1 turn pop off. Dual Links nowadays has this as a skill, I wish we would get it as a spell card instead of a trap that gives you destruction, card destruction, protection when you have no hand. But regardless, yeah, it was okay. Infernity Knight, Sin tier, this card is terrible. It came out a few years after the rest of Infernity support. It basically says, its card gets destroyed, you can discard 2 cards, special summon this card again. That doesn't come up, ever. I don't think I've ever seen that effect go off, so that should say enough. This was a terrible effect. Infernity Launcher, S tier. Hospital, you can discard a Infernity card, which is already nice. Then also you can send it to the graveyard to revive 2 Infernity monsters. No level restriction, keeping the levels intact, keeping their effects intact. Yeah, that's just horribly broken. It's the card Infernity live by. It's just such a good card. I wish it would go back to 2 or 3 Infernity would still do nothing, but yeah, Kodama's afraid of them. Infernity Mirage, A tier. It's also really good. It's a bit like Launcher, but it does require some setup to use. It's not as free as Launcher, it's not as guaranteed, so you know. It's a really good card, but some builds have decided not to run it. In Xyz builds makes sense, a single build, if you're running it, that's a no-brainer. Nowadays it's a one-off in the most up-to-date build. There are arguments to run more copies, but I just think one copy is fine. It's consistent enough. You see it when you need it to see it. You can just search it. It's an Infernity card. It's a very solid card. It just revives 2 monsters. It cannot be special for the grave, so you need to put in some effort to recycle it. It's a really strong card, but I think these are a tier above it, if that makes sense. Like, these deserve to be in a higher tier. Just like Infernity Necromancer. Infernity Necromancer is simple. Once per turn you can just revive an Archfiend, an Infernity monster from the graveyard. No level restriction, effect intact, no hard once per turn. This is just as much part of the Infernity deck as Archfiend. Like, no matter what build, you're probably running these 3 cards. I can't think of a build without these 3. At least in some way. Infernity Paranoia, E tier, it's useful. It's just doesn't do that much. So you can tribute the Dark Monster special with Infernity monster from the deck with the same level. Its effect negated. The effect negated was a bit too much, if you ask me. Also, you can banish it from your graveyard in another turn to add an Infernity card from your grave to your hand. Which sounds great, but we're a 1-turn deck, so I mean, it doesn't come up enough. I've noticed the recent builds, you don't really play this card, so you know. E tier is probably the right placement for this card. Also, I'm not ordering within tiers if anyone asks. Just, yeah. Whew, S tier, honestly, I can't think of a third deck right now that would not run Patriarch. It's just a very good card, just summoning itself from your hand if you have no other cards in your hand. It's a bubble man for Infernity, and it's really good. I used to sleep on this card, but it's better than Barrier. I might make builds without Barrier, I might make builds without Mirage, but I can't think of a build without Patriarch. It's just such a good card. People might say, hey, S tier for Patriarch, is that a bit overkill? No, it's definitely not. This card's insanely strong. This is a dead giveaway in every deck. Like, every Infernity build will be running Patriarch in some form. It's just such a good card. Now, it's a hard odds per turn, so running it more than 1 copy is a bit idiotic. I've seen people make that mistake, but yeah. It's just a very good card. Infernity Pawn, I believe it's called. I'm not entirely sure about the name. Basically, you can, if this is in your graveyard, you have no cards in your hand, you can skip your draw phase. Either stack an Infernity monster on top of your deck, or set a void spell, or trap from your deck. It skips your draw phase, it has its utilities combined with other cards, so I'm putting it into D tier. It's definitely not that great, but it's better than the cards below it for sure. What's the use for this card? Dugaris, the Xyz, rank 4, skips your next main phase 1, which means you go to your draw phase, draw a card, standby phase, immediately go to battle phase. Something like Eldritch, something like Altergeist will be able to use the traps, so you have a card in your hand, your barriers are not live, your Void Ogre is not live, they can suddenly go off. This card prevents that. It skips your draw phase, which is way better than most people give it credit for. That's why I think it deserves D tier. The Void, setting of a Void spell trap does not matter, you won't ever use that, you stack an Infernity card. You just want to skip your draw phase. It sounds crazy, but I think there's reasons to run it. There's at least a debate. It's below average, but I still think in a modern world it has reasons to be run. Phantom Hand, even for its time, it was terrible. Like, if it was a spell, maybe, but you need to set it, and then a turn after you can activate it to banish cards from your hand until the next turn. So, you know, you kinda don't have a hand, but you do. Yeah, this card never really was good in the first place. The only use I can see with it, especially in remote duels, is combining it with Pot of Desires to kind of add cards to your hand, cheat that way. Now, usually I don't encourage cheating, but remote duels are so stupid that I'll allow it. But yeah, outside of cheating, I don't see much use for this card, honestly. Well, there's an Infernity Exodia deck I once played against Phoenix Eye, but that's a different story. There's Infernity Randomizer. D tier, it's cute. Basically, once per turn, if you have no cards in your hand, you can activate the top card of your deck. If it's a monster, you deal damage equal to its level, multiplied by 200, I believe. If it's a spell trap, you take 500 damage. And yeah, that's what it does, basically. It had some control decks based around it, but nowadays it's way too slow. But it's a cute concept, I think it's cool. It's not necessarily good, however, but you know, it's a cool concept. Infernity Reflector, something like that. I forgot the exact name of this card. One of the weaker Infernity Trap cards for sure, definitely not the weakest though. Basically, something like if a card you control is destroyed by battle, or if a 30 monster you control is destroyed by battle, or if your opponent attacks, I'm not sure about the exact conditions. Discard your entire hand, inflict 1000 damage, something like that, something stupid. It doesn't... I don't remember the exact effect, I'll look it up, but basically it requires you to discard your entire hand, which is like, if this card is face down, you don't want to. Infernity Reflector. Activate only by discarding all the cards in your hand when an Infernity monster you control is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. Select and special summon that monster from the graveyard and inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. This makes Archfiend this time, I believe, pretty sure it does. But yeah, it's just a singular monster reborn that requires you to discard your entire hand. Sorry, singular carved out is more accurate. But keep this in mind, you need to discard your entire hand. You need to have a hand with Infernity for this to work. You can't resolve this in a good build. Infernity Sage, I think a C tier is justified. It has its uses, it's just not good enough yet. Another one of those cases where Infernity Reinforcement of the army would do it really well. It would serve it really well. Multiple you can just discard your entire hand, which is a decent effect. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. And when it's sent to the graveyard, if you have no cards in your hand, you can send another Infernity card from your deck to the grave. This is really good, but we don't have reliable ways to really do this where we benefit from it. It's a level 2 tuner, that's a bit interesting. It gives us other options, but it's not good enough. We don't run it. Third Suppression, sin. If you play this, stop playing 30, no doubt. Probably the worst Infernity card out of the modern support. What it's supposed to do is stop hand traps. In reality, what it does is it wastes space in your spell and trap zone and creates additional breaks. Because a good player will play around this. Oh, by the way, what are the worst hand traps for Infernity? Thinking. Oh yeah, Troll and Lockbird and Archfiend Nibiru. Maybe Maxi if that's legal. Now, what do these cards have in common? Right. Okay, you're playing Infernity. Drop Maxi when you have cards in your hand. You cannot use this. Troll and Lockbird. Okay, you search a card. On the search of a card where you have a card in your hand, use Suppression. Oh wait, you can't because, you know, you have a card in your hand. Okay, you just control Lockbird, pass your turn. Nibiru. Okay, on the resolve of Sayuja, when you draw cards, okay, drop the Nibiru. Boom, Suppression's not live. Okay, so you're playing your starters, right? You're going into tour guide to summon something for the deck. Okay, Veilig. I get Suppression the oh wait, you don't control Infernity, you control tour guide. This card just does not work. It doesn't work. Like, the only argument that can be made for it is that people accidentally walk into it. But if they know you're playing Infernity, they will play around it. If Infernity ever becomes relevant, they will play around it. There's no argument to be made for this card. There's one singular argument. If you play it at 3, there's a chance you hard draw it. Your opponent will not expect it, and then it could theoretically work. But we use those arguments for a lot of anime-like cards. With the same line of argumentation, you could run Starlight Road in every deck. I mean, if by some chance your opponent opens Lightning Storm, can negate it and get a free Stardust Dragon. Yeah, it sounds really good until you start to think about practicality. Same issue as a Third Suppression. With other practical cards, most of the hand traps you're supposed to stop, it doesn't stop. It's just such a worthless card, it's not good. You either need to search it, and if you can search this with your Archfiend, you already have your combo set up, it's not good. You're better off just getting Break or Barrier. If you hard draw it, well, what's it gonna stop? An effect, Valor, and Permanence. Impermanence it can't stop, it only stops monsters. And the issue with Valor is, what are they gonna Valor? With the most up-to-date build, the 3-axis build, that's the correct build, you don't have anything valuable in your starters. Cherubini can't be negated. So you do your entire setup, at which point this card wouldn't do anything. You can still get ashed on your Phoenix Rhino, but guess what? You're not controlling Infernity cards, so Suppression wouldn't do anything. Okay, you summon Archfiend, which implies you probably also have Necromancer. So maybe you summon Necromancer that gets negated. What makes it so that something like Succession, Zero Max would be better? So instead of negating that hand trap like the Valor, you just take it, link away your Necromancer with your Cherubini into Psyframe Link, for example. Use your Revival spell instead of Suppression, revive the Necromancer, and then just use the effect again. Suppression doesn't add anything to your deck. You either need to search it, at which point, if you can search this, you're already set up anyway, so it's a win more card, or you need to hard draw it, in which case you probably rather have a Revival spell. Infernity Suppression doesn't do what it's supposed to do. This is a battle I'm willing to die on, a hill I'm willing to die on, this card's not good. People who think this card is good do not understand combo decks and do not understand Infernity decks. You're better off playing Exchange, it has more chance of stopping hand traps. That's my TED talk on Infernity Suppression. And it's Void Ogre Dragon. Also one of those B tier, so actually, A tier. The only thing it hasn't going for it is that it's not an Infernity card. If it was an Infernity card, S tier no doubt. Level 8 Synchro requires like a Dark Monster as one of the materials, I believe. I'm not entirely sure, I just make it all the time. I know it can easily be made. Once per turn, during either player's turn, when a spell trap is activated by your opponent, while you have no cards in your hand, you can just negate it. Just nice, free spell trap negation. Well, free, I mean, you need to summon a big boy. Here's the thing. If you combine it with Appaloosa, you can already negate 5 cards. That's enough to make somebody lose the duel. It also makes it so you don't need to shotgun barrier on all their spell traps. You can just have this additional negation. Plus once per turn. If you somehow don't finish them in a single turn, it can just negate again. Very good card. Wave Motion Inferno. I'm just gonna give it the Mercy F tier because it boosts all your Infernity attack and defense, or just attack, I'm not even sure. And it allows you to discard, send itself to the grave to discard your entire hand. Hey, at least back in the day, if you didn't know what to do with Infernity, you could just put 3 copies of this in. Either your Archfiend is really big, or you can discard your hand. Definitely not good, but there are arguments to be made to run this card. Wildcat. E tier probably? Wait, but you run it nowadays. That is correct. I run it because it's a level 3 tuner, same case as an Avenger. It's not a good effect, I just run it because it's a level 3 tuner. The effects doesn't matter. If it's a 0/0 vanilla, I would run it. Because I need it for my combo. Thing is, its effects are good in theory, but in practice they aren't that great. Well, one of their effects is okay. First effect, you can discard an Infernity monster to special summon it. Now, this sounds very good. I've seen people run 3 copies because of this. But let me tell you this. Look at your Infernity list. How many other Infernity monsters are you running, besides Wildcat? The answer is probably like around 6 Infernity monsters. The odds of being able to actually discard something for this effect are way too low. That's why it's not good. If there's any card to benefit from an Infernity Rota, just a spell card to search any Infernity monster, it would be this card. This card would be insanely good with it. You would be running Infernity General. And if you ever get Dark Graphic to 3 and maybe Reinforced Arbiter 2 or something like that, you might start running this card with more copies. As the game is right now, the first effect isn't reliable. The second effect has potential. You can banish an Infernity monster from your graveyard, increase its level by 1, or decrease its level by 1. Now, the thing is, you can turn it to level 4, use it Archfiend and go to level 8 Synchro without needing an additional monster. That has potential. I've used it before. You know, it definitely has potential. It's also the only real, one of the 2 reliable ways to go into Doom Archfiend if you somehow insist, but yeah, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, it's level 3. It has an okay effect, it's just not usable with the current card pool of Infernity. We need a Rota to make this work. Anyways, on to the next one. Zero Max. Not an Infernity card in name, but it can revive an Infernity monster once per turn. Kinda not sure which one I place it. Part of me wants to place it in S tier, it's probably like in between tiers. It's a really good card. People are underestimating this card. Although when I look at the market, it's bought out almost entirely and there's no reprint, so let's just hope people keep sleeping on this card so people can at least play Infernity. Because damn, a playset's like 30-40 bucks already. Yeah. So, what this does, if you have no cards in your hand, you can activate it, so you need to set it first, by the way. For those that don't know, you need to set it first, don't cheat. You can target a 30 monster in your graveyard, special summon it, destroy all monsters with attack lower than it, and skip your battle phase. Now, these last 2 things are nasty, but keep in mind, this is a going first deck. You're just popping off turn 1. Skipping your battle phase doesn't matter. It's like it shoots Fairy Dragon, you don't have battle phase. It destroys everything. But Necromancer destroys everything under 0 attack. There is nothing under 0 attack, so it doesn't destroy anything. It's just another monster reborn that revives Necromancer. Necromancer revives Archfiend. Archfiend will search the Infernity card. Therefore, this is kind of like a Rota. Okay, you go into Cherubini, which can be hand trapped. You revive a Necromancer with something like Monster Reborn, Succession, or you have another way to get it on the field. Doesn't matter. You use your Necromancer, but it gets Veilered, or it gets Impermanence, or something like that. Oh no, okay, what you can do now is just link it away with your Cherubini into another link to, like the Cyframe Lord, which you usually run. Use this, revive Necromancer, just try to revive Archfiend again. It's better at dealing hand traps than Suppression, that's why it deserves an A tier. It's a revival card, it's an extender, it just does so much things for this deck. Very good card, can't think of a scenario where I wouldn't run it at 3 at the moment in 3Xs. Void Cauldron, below F tier, like this card's terrible. If you have no cards, if you have cards in your hand, destroy it. That's like already ridiculous. Once per turn, if a 30 card control will be destroyed by card effect, I believe, you can banish a 30 monster from grave to prevent that from happening. What? I mean, that doesn't even remotely make sense. Konami, what the hell? So yeah, this card is terrible. Every card that is in here deserves to be here for a reason. I know people will counter-argue, but there's a reason I'm the Infernity God and you're not. Wow, you're calling yourself the Infernity God, that's a high ego thing. Well, I mean, it kinda is, but it's also true, so, you know. Yeah. Anyways, all things aside, hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you guys next time. I'm signing out. And this was my up-to-date Infernity tier list. Now for this Infernity week, I'll be making more discussion videos probably. Maybe, I'll look into it. And of course, I'll be doing a lot of Infernity replays, one every day. That's the plan. So yeah, get ready for that as well. Peace.